Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to do a deep dive today
Okay.
on the global market for Valganciclovir.
Awesome.
This is a key medication used to manage cytomegalovirus,
Right.
or CMV infections.
Yeah.
CMV is a common virus. Most healthy people won't even notice it,
Oh,
but it can be very serious for individuals with weakened immune systems, like
yeah,
those who have had organ transplants or folks living with HIV/AIDS.
exactly.
And so, you've shared a really comprehensive market analysis report with me.
Right.
And that's really going to be our jumping off point today.
Absolutely.
So kind of give us a sense of where we're going to be going with this deep dive.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about
Okay.
Valganciclovir, pulling the most important information
Okay.
from a really detailed report by Cognitive Market Research.
Gotcha.
So think of it as like a snapshot of the current market
Okay.
and a look into how it's expected to evolve over time.
Gotcha.
We're going to cover everything from like the overall size
Okay.
to where we're expecting the growth to happen
Mm.
across the different parts of the world,
Come
and
out.
then also how it breaks down,
Okay.
depending on, who's using it and why.
Okay, cool. So it's not just a whole bunch of numbers and
No, it's not just going to be
that
charts and things like that.
about the data points.
Right.
It's about kind of pulling out the story.
Exactly. What are the
Sitka numbers.
key takeaways about this market?
Right.
What are the trends that are shaping it?
Yeah.
And we really want to give folks, kind of a clear
Sure.
understanding of
Yeah.
what's happening
Yeah.
without kind of overwhelming them.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I saw that really kind of jumped out at me is
Okay.
the global market for Valganciclovir is projected to be worth
Yeah.
around 342.8 million
Right.
US dollars in
Mhm.
2025.
Exactly.
So that kind of gives you a sense of the scale that we're talking about.
It does. And that 342.8 million figure in 2025.
That's not just a static number. That's really the starting point
Right.
for understanding the market's momentum.
Right. It's not just staying put, it's going to expand.
Yeah, it's going to grow.
Yeah.
The projections actually show the market reaching 498.88 million
Wow.
US dollars by 2033. So that's a pretty substantial increase.
Okay. So we're talking over the next, almost decade there.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're seeing a pretty steady climb, is there?
It is a steady climb.
Yeah. Is there?
And there's a specific metric that
Mhm.
we can look at.
Oh, okay.
The report highlights a compound annual growth rate,
Okay.
or CAGR,
Okay.
of 4.8% from 2025 to 2033.
Gotcha.
And this CAGR essentially tells us the average yearly growth rate
Gotcha.
if the market grows at a consistent pace over that period.
Okay. So about 4.8%
Right around 4.8%.
growth each year
Exactly.
on average.
Yeah.
And so what's driving that? What's making the Valganciclovir market expand?
So the primary factor fueling this expansion is the increasing number of people susceptible to CMV infections.
Okay.
So this includes a growing population of organ transplant recipients,
Right. Okay.
individuals managing HIV/AIDS,
Mm-hmm.
and really any other conditions that are weakening the immune system.
Okay.
So as medical science progresses and these vulnerable populations grow,
Yeah.
the need for effective treatments like Valganciclovir also grows.
Logically, that makes
Makes perfect sense.
perfect sense. More individuals at risk
Yeah.
translates directly to the need
Yeah.
for the medication.
Exactly.
Now let's look at how this market kind of breaks down geographically.
Okay.
I notice in the information that you sent me that North America
Yeah,
seems to hold a significant position.
absolutely. North America accounts for the largest portion
Okay.
of the global Valganciclovir market,
Gotcha.
bringing in over 40% of the total revenue.
Wow.
In 2025, their market size is projected to be around 137.12 million
Okay.
US dollars.
So that's larger than all of Europe combined.
It is larger than all of Europe.
Combined.
Over 5%, that's a pretty dominant share.
Is.
And is the growth in North America expected to continue
Okay.
at that same pace as the global average?
North America is actually projected to have the highest CGR
Okay.
among all regions at 7.9%
Wow.
from 2025 to 2033.
Okay.
So not only do they have the largest market share currently,
Right.
but they're also expected to grow at a faster rate
Okay.
than other parts of the world.
Interesting. So what's specifically driving that?
Okay, so several factors are
Yeah.
contributing to that.
Okay.
One is the high prevalence of conditions leading to weakened immune systems.
Right.
Additionally, North America has a growing elderly population,
Okay.
And then also they have really advanced healthcare infrastructure.
Gotcha.
So they have better diagnostics and broader access to these specialized treatments.
Okay, so the infrastructure is there to identify and to treat.
Exactly.
And there's a growing need.
And there's a growing need within the population.
Within the population.
Yeah. The report also gives us a little bit of a closer look
It does.
at the individual countries
Yeah.
within North America.
Mm-hmm. So within North America, the United States is the primary driver,
Okay.
with a projected market size of 108.19 million in 2025,
Okay.
although their CGR is a bit lower at 2.8%.
Okay.
Canada is expected to have a market size of 16.45 million
Gotcha.
in 2025 with a CGR of 3.8%.
Okay.
And Mexico is projected at 12.48 million with a CGR of 3.5%.
Gotcha. So the U.S. is the giant, but Canada and Mexico are
Okay.
definitely contributing to that overall.
Yeah, they're definitely players.
North American growth story.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's shift our focus over to Europe.
Oh.
You mentioned that they hold the second largest.
Yes, they hold the second largest market share. They account for over 30% of the global Valganciclovir revenue,
Okay.
with a market size of 102.84 million projected for 2025.
And what's the outlook for growth in Europe? Is it a similar picture?
So the growth in Europe is expected to be
A little bit more moderate,
okay.
with a CAGR of 3.3% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay.
So while it still represents a positive trend, it's not as rapid as the growth that's anticipated in North America.
Okay, so a more steady and perhaps mature market.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Compared to North America's kind of faster expansion,
Mhm.
what are the key elements that are shaping the European market?
Similar to North America, increasing awareness and prevalence of CMV infections are important factors.
Okay.
However, the wider availability of generic versions of Valganciclovir in Europe
Okay.
might be influencing the revenue growth
Gotcha.
compared to regions with stronger patent protections.
Okay.
So essentially, this greater availability can increase access for patients,
Mm-hmm.
but potentially moderate the overall market value increase.
Makes sense. More generic options could lead to lower overall spending, even if usage increases.
Mm-hmm.
And the report gives us some specific country examples
It does.
within Europe. For instance, the UK market is projected at 17.28 million in 2025, with a KGR of 4.1%.
Gotcha.
Germany at 20.36 million with a 3.5% CAGR.
Okay.
And France at 9.46 million with a 2.5% CAGR.
Okay.
Interestingly, Russia is projected at 15.94 million
Okay.
with a 2.3% CAGR.
Gotcha.
And the rest of Europe collectively is estimated at 15.94 million
Okay.
with a lower CAGR of 2%.
Interesting.
It's fascinating to see the varied growth rates, even within a single continent.
Yeah.
That lower growth in the rest of Europe
Yeah.
could perhaps be due to more established healthcare systems,
Right.
already addressing the needs, or potentially a greater penetration of generic medications earlier on.
Right. So they're already kind of ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
In some ways. It really highlights that even within a region,
yeah,
the market dynamics can be
they can be quite different.
really quite different.
Yeah.
Now let's turn our attention to another area that seems to have a lot of potential, and that is Asia Pacific.
Asia Pacific, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Asia Pacific currently holds around 23%
Okay.
of the global Valganciclovir revenue,
Okay.
with a market size of 78.84 million projected for 2025.
And the growth projections for this region look pretty significant.
They do. They look very promising.
Okay.
Asia Pacific is expected to have the second highest KGR globally
Okay.
at 6.8% from 2025 to 2033.
Wow.
So this really strong growth trajectory suggests a rapidly expanding market.
So while North America is the current frontrunner,
Right.
Asia Pacific is really gaining
Asia Pacific is gaining momentum.
for sure.
What's behind this impressive growth?
So a key factor here is the rising prevalence of conditions that lead to weakened immunity across the region.
Okay.
Coupled with that, a lot of countries in Asia Pacific
Yeah.
are seeing significant improvements in their diagnostic capabilities
Okay.
and a rapid expansion of their healthcare infrastructure.
Gotcha.
This means more people are being correctly diagnosed.
And have access to necessary treatments.
So it seems like increasing access to healthcare
Yeah.
in a region.
In a region with a significant vulnerable population.
With a significant vulnerable population
Yes.
is really creating a strong demand
It's creating a strong demand.
for this medication. Did the report give us any specific examples
I did.
of countries within Asia
Yeah.
Pacific?
Yeah.
Okay.
So China is projected to have a market size of 33.11 million in 2025,
Okay.
with a CGR of 6.3%.
Okay.
India stands out with a projected size of 9.46 million
Okay.
and a particularly high CGR of 8.6%.
Wow.
That's actually the highest country-specific CGR
Gorgeous.
we've seen mentioned so far.
Wow, India leading the pack with
Yeah.
that high growth rate?
Exactly.
That really emphasizes the dynamic nature of the global market.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to Latin America.
Okay.
What's their current share of the global market?
So Latin America accounts for more than 5% of the global Valganciclovir revenue, with a market size of 17.14 million projected for 2025.
And what's the anticipated rate of growth in Latin America?
The CAGR for Latin America is projected to be 4.2%
Okay.
from 2025 to 2033.
So we're looking at steady growth, although not as accelerated as North
Yes.
America or Asia Pacific. What are the primary factors influencing the market for Valganciclovir?
Okay, so similar to other regions,
Yeah.
the increasing prevalence of conditions that compromise the immune system
Right.
and a growing awareness of CMV infections are important drivers.
Okay.
And also, improvements in healthcare infrastructure across the region
Gotcha.
are contributing to better access to diagnosis and treatment.
And did the report highlight any specific countries within Latin America?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Brazil is projected to have a market size of 7.34 million in 2025,
Okay.
with a CGR of 4.8%.
Gotcha.
Argentina is estimated at 2.88 million with a 5.1% CAGR.
Okay.
And the rest of Latin America collectively is projected at 2.76 million
Okay.
with a lower CGR of 3.3%.
Okay, so Brazil and Argentina
So Brazil and Argentina seem to be the larger players.
seem to be leading the way there,
Yes.
similar to how the U.S. dominates in North America.
Exactly. Finally, let's take a look at the Middle East and Africa.
Okay.
What's their current market share?
The Middle East and Africa currently hold around 2%
Okay.
of the global Valganciclovir revenue,
Okay.
with a market size of 6.86 million projected for 2025.
Now, what are the growth expectations for this region?
So the CAGR for the Middle East and Africa is projected to be 4.5%
Okay.
from 2025 to 2033.
What's driving the growth in this part of the world?
Rising rates of conditions that are leading to weakened immunity, ongoing development of healthcare infrastructure,
Right.
and increasing government initiatives aimed at improving healthcare access are all contributing to the growth in this region.
And were there any specific country or sub-regional insights for the Middle East and Africa?
So the GCC countries are projected to have a market size of 2.93 million in 2025.
Okay. With a CAGR of 5.3%.
Okay.
South Africa is estimated at 1.08 million with a 5.5% CAGR.
Okay.
And the rest of the MEA region is projected at 0.81 million with a lower CGR of 3.5%.
Interesting. So there's promising growth in the GCC countries in South Africa?
Yes.
But the rest of the region shows a more modest pace.
Right, a little bit slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting to see these variations across different regions.
It is.
Now, the report didn't just look at geography.
Right.
It also broke down the market in other ways.
It did.
Such as who is using the medication, what they're using it for, and how it's being distributed.
Right.
So let's start with the patient age groups.
Okay. So in terms of patient age groups, the report indicates that the largest segment currently is adult patients.
Okay.
This is largely due to the higher incidence of conditions requiring Valganciclovir in adults, such as those undergoing organ transplantations or adults living with HIV/AIDS.
Okay, so that really aligns with what we were talking about before with those primary risk groups. But the report also pointed out which age group is seeing the fastest growth in terms of Valganciclovir use.
Yes. So the fastest growing segment by age is the pediatric patient segment.
Interesting.
So this growth is being driven by increased awareness and diagnosis of CMV infections in newborns and children with weakened immune systems, whether that's due to congenital CMV or following organ transplantation in childhood.
So while adults represent the biggest chunk of the market now, the pediatric market is expanding at the most rapid pace.
Yes, the pediatric market is the fastest growing.
Interesting. So while the current focus might be on adult use, we could see a shift towards pediatric applications.
Potentially, yeah.
In the future.
Yeah.
Now, what about the specific ways Valganciclovir is being used? Applications. What's the primary use case?
The dominant application for Valganciclovir is in the context of organ transplantation.
Gotcha.
So it's critical for preventing and treating CMV infections in transplant recipients, as these infections can be very severe and can even lead to rejection of the transplanted organ.
Yeah, so the increasing and frequency of organ transplantation procedures globally is directly kind of fueling
Exactly. It's definitely a driving force
in this area. And just like with the age groups, there was a fastest growing application identified in the report?
Yes. The fastest growing application segment is the treatment of cytomegalovirus retinitis.
Interesting.
So this is an infection of the retina that can cause vision loss and even blindness.
That's serious.
If left untreated,
Wow.
And it's becoming increasingly prevalent among individuals with severely compromised immune systems, particularly those with advanced HIV/AIDS. So the rising incidence of this condition is really driving the increased use.
So while organ transplant is the largest current use, treating CMV retinitis is a rapidly expanding area.
Yeah, it's a rapidly growing area.
Okay, so organ transplant is the established major use, but the need to combat CMV-related vision issues is becoming increasingly...
It's becoming more and more significant. Yeah.
Finally, let's consider how Valganciclovir actually gets to the patients. The different distribution channels.
Right, so the distribution channels, the report highlights that hospital pharmacies are currently the dominant channel. For Valganciclovir.
Gotcha.
So this makes sense because a large proportion of the patients who require this medication, such as, transplant recipients and those with acute or severe immunocompromising conditions, receive their care directly through hospitals. So it makes sense that that would be the primary distribution channel.
And is there a distribution channel?
There is.
That is growing?
Yes. The fastest growing quick distribution channel is retail pharmacies.
Interesting.
And this growth is being propelled by a few factors. So increased patient access and convenience as more people are managing their conditions on an outpatient basis. And then the growing availability of generic versions of Valganciclovir.
So we're seeing a shift.
Yeah, it seems like we are.
Towards more accessible community pharmacies playing a bigger role in getting this medication to those who need it. Now, the report also touched on some of the broader forces at play in the market, the things that are helping it grow or potentially holding it back.
Right, those market dynamics.
So
the report identified several key market drivers. One significant factor is the increasing preference for Valganciclovir over the older oral ganciclovir formulations. And this is largely due to its improved absorption by the body, making it more effective and more convenient to use. The overall rising awareness of CMV infections among healthcare professionals and advancements in healthcare infrastructure globally are also significant tailwinds for the market.
So better drug formulations, greater awareness, and improving healthcare systems are all
they're all pushing the market forward.
Are there any headwinds, any factors that might be limiting?
The report does highlight some restraints. A notable one is the relatively high cost of Valganciclovir treatment, which can be a barrier to access.
Especially in,
particularly in regions with lower healthcare spending or limited insurance coverage.
So costs and the complexities of regulatory processes are potential hurdles to wider adoption. What about the overall trends?
So the overall trends
that the report pointed to
really reinforce what we've already discussed. The increasing number of individuals with weakened immune systems and the rise in CMV infections remain a central trend. And the continuous efforts in research and development are expected to lead to improvements in Valganciclovir formulations. And potentially the exploration of new therapeutic applications.
Given all this activity and the various players involved, it sounds like the market for Valganciclovir must be...
It's described as
a highly competitive
market in a report.
And what's contributing to that?
So a major factor contributing to this is the expiration of the patent for Roche's original Valcyte, which has opened the door for numerous generic drug manufacturers to produce and market more affordable alternatives.
So that introduction of generic options often shakes up the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
So what are the main strategies that companies are using to try and stay ahead in this environment?
The report points to several key competitive strategies. One is obtaining regulatory approvals in diverse geographic regions.
Makes sense.
So that expands their market reach.
Right.
Strategic pricing is also essential.
Especially in the face of
generic competition.
Generic competition and then expanding their presence.
And global expansion.
In global markets.
Yeah.
And the report even gives us a list of some of the major companies operating in this market.
So it provides a list of prominent companies involved in the Valganciclovir market. This includes Roche as the originator of Valcyte and a significant number of generic manufacturers, such as Cipla, Ltd., Mylan NV, Teva Pharmaceutical Industries, LPD, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, Ltd., Aurobindo Pharma, Ltd., Lupin Pharmaceuticals, Inc., Zydus Life Sciences, Ltd., Apotex, Inc., Sun Pharmaceutical Industries, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, Ltd., and Alchem Laboratories, Ltd.
Wow. That's a lot.
It's a pretty extensive list.
It is.
It really highlights how many companies are vying for a piece of this market.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take a moment to kind of recap the key insights we've gleaned from this deep dive into the Valganciclovir.
Absolutely, report.
The global market for Valganciclovir is substantial, and it's projected to continue on a path of steady growth in the coming years.
Right, and this growth is being driven by the increasing need to manage CMV infections in vulnerable patient populations.
That's the main driver.
And while North America currently holds the largest share of the market, Asia Pacific is demonstrating the most significant potential for rapid expansion. And when we look at how the drug is being used, the adult patient segment and its application in preventing CMV after organ transplantation are currently
the most prevalent.
And however, the pediatric patient segment and the use of Valganciclovir to treat CMV retinitis are the areas experiencing the most rapid growth.
They are.
Suggesting potential shifts.
There
might be some shifts.
Draw market focus over time.
In the future, And
despite this overall growth, there are still some important challenges that need to be addressed, particularly concerning ensuring equitable access to this medication and managing the costs of treatment
those are cool.
in various parts of the world.
Considerations.
So for you, the listener, who wanted a concise yet thorough understanding of this market, I hope this deep dive has provided you with exactly that. A look at the key figures, the driving forces.
And the trends shaping the global Valganciclovir market.
For sure.
It's a quick way to get up to speed on this specific area of the pharmaceutical industry.
It is. And it really leaves us with a very important question to ponder. Considering the disparities in growth across the different regions and the ongoing challenges related to the cost of treatment. What innovative solutions might be needed from, pharmaceutical companies, governments, and healthcare organizations to ensure that this vital medication reaches all the patients who need it, regardless of where they live or their economic circumstances.
It's a complex interplay of so many different factors.
It is. It's really complex. And it's a situation that will undoubtedly continue to evolve.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.